Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Host Operations Manual Review Session for the Tournament Directors for the Indoor Bocce District Tournaments. My name is Melissa Kelly. I'm the Senior Director for School Sports Programming. Appreciate your time as we review this document as well as supporting documents that will help you best administer and manage the district tournaments. As you know, we have 7 districts, thus 7 district tournaments, and I hope to assist you as you prepare for these and manage them. The manual is designed to be your one-stop shop, in essence, to help you prepare and ready yourself to host your schools and your district. I'll review the document as well as the supporting documents, and if you have any questions at the end, I'll pause briefly to allow for that opportunity. Otherwise, I'll be sure to follow up with you after the session in the coming weeks to ensure that the readiness and your comfort level in administering the district tournaments. Again, thank you for your time, and without any further ado, let's proceed. Everyone should have received the manual already. Please print several copies, obviously, and have those on hand on site. We will not provide any printed documents. However, if you need any supporting documents or anything in Word version or a version in which you can revise the documents, please feel free, especially the supplements that are provided. Please do let me know, and I'm happy to provide those. I'm not going to go through the manual word for word. It is quite thorough, and hopefully you will have sufficient time in preparing, being that we are several weeks out from any one of the district tournaments. So if there are any questions, obviously I am your primary point of contact as you host these tournaments. The introduction, one change from last year is that Special Olympics Maryland has allocated funds for the tournament director, that is you, obviously, to appoint 1 additional staff personnel, and we will pay that person the equivalent of the MPSSAA tournament stipend of $75. This person should support you in your efforts leading up to the tournament and then certainly the day of. I will send additional information regarding the parameters in which you can appoint someone. Quite specifically, there are 2 simple restrictions in that it cannot be a current indoor bocce coach, and secondly, it should not be the supervisor of athletics or the host athletics director, as those 2 roles are seen to be or considered to be responsible for this tournament alike, and it would fall under their role as in those 2 roles. If the magnitude and responsibility surrounding your tournament require a 3rd person to be appointed, please let me know. I'm happy to consider that option. And then as well, we would pay that individual, again, $75 stipend for their time and expertise leading up to and day of the tournament. I need to know those individuals' names as soon as possible, and then if the 3rd person comes into play, I need to know that individual's name no later than 2 weeks prior. It is my goal to have checks on hand at the tournament so that we can pay those people right away rather than sending checks soon thereafter. Next page, reminding everyone of the Special Olympics mission, philosophy, the Special Olympics Maryland vision, values, and the Special Olympics Athlete's Oath. Those are offered there. And then the next page is simply contact information for my colleagues and I, as well as the district representatives for each of the districts participating in indoor bocce, and then a couple of those actually do not participate in indoor bocce, but they are offered there as a point of reference. Section 1, ceremonies. As a reminder, Special Olympics is recognized by the International Olympic Committee. Therefore, we are obligated to include 3 components in each of our competitions, being that opening ceremony, award ceremony, and closing. We will focus primarily on opening and closing. Opening and award ceremony. The opening ceremony, as many of you know through your experience with unified sports, sets the tone for the day. So please be sure to select a proper master or mistress of ceremony that is well-spoken, obviously enthusiastic, and high energy, so that all of the student athletes will feel that as well and understand the magnitude and excitement for the day. I've offered a ceremony script simply updating the one that was offered for last year's indoor bocce district tournaments. At the start of the script is a table offered so that you can write in each person that is fulfilling the role. We do offer a couple of components, being the Pledge of Allegiance and the national anthem. You can choose to include the Pledge of Allegiance. Obviously, most of the tournaments will be offered on school days, so that pledge would have already been offered during the morning announcements. But certainly it's another way to include and reward someone or a pair for their sportsmanship and general participation, recognizing them for their esteem during the regular season. So please do whatever you can to fulfill those roles and recognize those individuals who have set themselves apart during the regular season. Likewise, the national anthem. You can certainly recruit a color guard if you would like. Many schools have ROTC programs either within their building itself or within the county, so please do your best to recruit someone or a group to offer or present the colors. Similarly, a national anthemist, either a teacher or a student would be great, but please make sure that the person performing the anthem will do so in the proper way and the esteem that it deserves. Scrolling forward, as I said, this is a script and it is a template. It should offer everything that you need, but obviously each venue may in fact require some adjustment, so please feel free to revise that as you see fit. The different roles on the last page, the scripts for each of the individuals participating are offered there, so that you can simply have this one page and hand it to each individual offering their portion of the script. So you would need several copies of that on hand during the tournament. Moving forward to the award ceremony, it's my recommendation that you designate one person to oversee ceremonies, so that would be both opening and award ceremony. And the award ceremonies, while they will be somewhat informal, we do highly recommend that you do everything that you can to have them conducted with some pageantry and lead up and distinguishment from the tournament area. So by that I mean clearing an area, allowing for a simulated center stage, if you will, and having teams come forward, and if at all possible, reading each team member's name as they receive their award. It just adds to the, again, esteem and makes each student athlete feel recognized and a part of their success of their teams. As a reminder, coaches do not receive awards. I think our tenure coaches have accepted this and understand this expectation. However, please make sure that whomever is presenting the awards, that if a coach were to ask, or anyone who does not play that day, that we do not give those awards to anyone who has not played, and especially so coaches or paraprofessionals, any non-student athletes. Moving forward, there is a brief awards protocol Please take the time to review that so that you understand. This is an abbreviated version of what we offer within Special Olympics. Again, many of you are familiar with how awards are presented. Please do make sure that this is scheduled into your day and you allocate sufficient time to present to each team. While we do realize that some teams do have time limitations and restrictions that may require for them to leave early, it's very unorthodox, and we do not want to get into the habit of handing teams awards as they walk out the door or sending awards to teams after the event. Teams should be expected to stay on site, participate in the award ceremony, and be presented their awards. So anything varying from that, it should be a very rare exception. Just one last note regarding awards. Please make sure that within reason all of the student athletes look presentable. So they should have their team uniform on and should be free of any headwear, jackets, including headphones of any sort, and in essence look presentable. Obviously, we want to make sure that they look great and feel great as they receive their place of finish and are recognized for that. The announcer script is offered there. Moving forward, not much more with regard to the ceremonies. Tournament management. Just a few notes to remind everyone regarding different components and making sure. A lot of these carry over to the school system competitions, but want to make sure that everyone's on the same page for the Unified Indoor Bocce tournaments as well. Admission, while it might be the practice to charge an admission or a gate for the varsity competitions at the host school or school system, Special Olympics events are always free of charge. So with that designation, please you cannot charge a gate, parking fees, or anything similar for anyone coming to spectate. Artificial noisemakers, while our rules within competition do allow for a use of an artificial noisemaker for someone with a hearing impairment or similar, if that's the accommodation that they need. Artificial noisemakers such as cowbells, air horns, and such are not to be allowed in the venue whatsoever or used. So please make sure that that happens. National anthem we touched on should be played ahead of time. Neutrality. As I mentioned, you should be working with your host, athletics director, and your supervisor of athletics to host these tournaments and ready yourselves. Please make sure, even though the host institution obviously should have a team competing, that those individuals do know, anyone assisting with the management, that everyone does know that they need to maintain absolute neutrality and not show any favoritism whatsoever to their team competing. I think that's consistent and familiar to everyone, but please keep an eye on that and make sure that you address that should that come about whatsoever. Alcoholic beverages and tobacco, not allowed whatsoever. And then concessions is a great entity to offer and plan for. We've had some district tournament directors in the past work with their booster clubs to make sure that concessions are offered. Please make sure that you announce to the coaches ahead of time what they can expect with regard to food service. So will you provide water jugs on hand? Will cups be provided with those specific details so that they know if they need to bring their own drinking bottles or what have you, or if you will have concessions available on site. Please make sure that announcement is made. And as well, if you're not providing, if the tournament will cross over a meal time, as many will, if you could take the time to let the coaches know what and concessions are not offered, please take the time to let the coaches know some food delivery options that might be in the area. I'll use Cecil County as an example. They hosted the Unified Tennis District Tournament the past 2 years, and the tournament director makes available pizza delivery options so that the coaches can make that order while they're there at the tournament. Directional signs, obviously you'll have some visiting schools, so please make sure that you point out exactly where everyone will be reporting, both in advanced communication and advise them what directional signs to look for. For example, follow signs to the gymnasium, follow signs to the front entrance, and then proceed through the front entrance to the gymnasium, so on and so forth. Moving forward, the sample pregame timeline. We do need everyone to administer a coaches meeting on site the day of the tournament. With that consideration, this is an example timeline of what you would communicate to the coaches ahead of time so that they know when exactly to arrive and what to expect once they do arrive. Please also designate where the coaches meeting will take place. Have an agenda ahead of time, and certainly it's to be expected that you'll have some write-in agenda items that you think of last minute. I've given some examples there. We do need to, at that time, if you have not previous to, designate who will serve as the Sports Rules Committee. I'll get to that shortly as to who exactly should be on that committee. This is the committee that will hear any protests on site and rule on those. Opening ceremony, the script is designed to take approximately 10 minutes, and if you do in fact identify an athlete unified partner pair to act as the MCs, please perhaps allocate another 5 minutes to that so that we can make sure that they are not rushed through the ceremony. Competition management. The gold medalist allocations will be established based on the proportion of the overall number, the total number of teams practicing or training in the state overall. So, an example of that, last year we had several teams, and we calculated that we could accommodate approximately 30% of those teams at the state tournament. So in Frederick County, let's use Frederick as an example, we have 10 schools there. Let's say that each of those schools would have one team per school, accommodating 30% at the state tournament. That would mean that we would advance 3 of those teams to the state tournament. Again, that is just an example. We're in the process of tabulating and taking account of all of the teams that are training in the current season so that we can have an approximation of who, or the number of teams that will advance out of each district. However, we do not have that information readily available. As soon as that is determined, I will announce to you how many will advance, and then that is also the indicator of the number of divisions that will be in at the district tournament, thus the gold medalists who will advance. Roster consistency. This is imperative, and we want to make sure we are consistent with this and give it the due attention that it deserves and is necessary. The interscholastic bocce postseason registration, I'll give you an example of what that looks like. It's in prior seasons it was referenced as the team divisioning assessment score and our score sheet. Having those a printed copy of each of those, or having those available electronically on hand, we need to make sure that that occurs so that the coach has that as a reference if there's a roster dispute. We want to make sure that the players listed on that registration are consistent with the players that are playing on each of the team rosters. As you know, many schools will sponsor 2 and 3 teams, so we need to make sure that coaches are not interchanging student-athletes among all of their teams, that they are consistent with the roster. More on that here shortly. Competition brackets and following supplement, each of the competition bracket options are made available. Considering your timetable, you would establish a time limit for each of your matches, and then as well, if there is a tie within the division, how exactly that tie will be broken, if you will play additional matches or abbreviated matches, or you will institute a tie-break criteria, meaning points lost, for example, would be the first criteria, and points scored the second criteria, for example. Match results, consistent with last year, the first team to score 16 points or the previously designated time limit elapses, whichever one comes first will designate the winner. As mentioned in previous emails, we do recommend that the time limit to be 30 minutes. However, with space and time limitations, the number of teams sponsored in some of the districts, we do realize that that may need to be modified, but we would like to see that to be no less than 20 minutes, if at all possible. Each of the teams shall play no less than 2 matches as well, so please keep that in mind as you establish your competition schedule. Match overtime, many of you are familiar. If the score is tied at the end of regulation, then the teams will continue to compete and play full frames until a winner is determined. Declaration of last frame. This is another very important entity that you need to work with whomever is announcing that day to make sure that this is implemented on site. The last frame, so maintaining a clock on site is imperative, obviously, as we have a time limit consideration for each of the matches. So, for example, in the last minute, as the last minute is ticked down, designating that the players are currently within the last frame, so that each of the teams know that they should not expect to hurry through that frame and start another frame, and then or any adjustment to the time limit whatsoever. So declaring the last frame is absolutely essential. Delay of game. This is an unfortunate component that we have run into from time to time during the season, so please keep an eye on this as well. Coaches have made accusations, unfortunately, in the past of their opponents that they are taking their time, or once they gain a lead, trying to elapse time and slow the game down. If you whatsoever hear any such statements or what have you, please do speak with the individual making the statement, and then as well, if you feel as though the delay of game is actual and egregious, please do feel free to add additional time to the regulation time if you would like to do so. Sports information. Please do, you yourself and anyone you're working with, take the time to review the 2014-2015 Indoor Bocce Coaches Resource Guide. This is the guide that offers all of the rules and protocols and was distributed and referenced during the coaches' preseason meeting and training. I'll pull that out now so that you have an idea of what that looks like. You should have a copy of this, either electronically or hard copy. Please, again, take the time to review this and ensure that all of the rules specified in this document are upheld at the district tournament. If you have any questions regarding that, I'm happy to take those as they come about. A control center and results calculation are closely related. It's important that you establish a control area, so this could be the announcer stand or a side table, however you see it best designed to suit your venue. The control center will accept all of the score sheets and then also maintain the posted brackets on site. It's important to post your brackets so that all of the coaches and student athletes and spectators can follow the progression of each of the divisions as the day goes on. Similarly, the results, all of the results sheets, if you do maintain written results as well as the required posted results, are scoreboards for each of the courts that whomever is manning the control center is responsible for that as well. A best practice is to collect and maintain, even after the tournament, all of the paperwork, the brackets, score sheets, so on and so forth, for at least a week, so that if there are any disputes soon thereafter, that they can be addressed and clearly determined. Scratches. Coaches may scratch players. Certainly there could be a circumstance in which student athletes do not show, so coaches can scratch those individuals on site. However, again, he or she may not interchange players from roster to roster if they have multiple teams. Roster consistency is imperative, and then likewise, they may not designate or have an alternate play on any team. If the coach does choose to substitute, please make sure that he or she is fully aware that they would then be forfeiting that match and playing exhibition only. Lastly, protests. As I mentioned previously, establishing a sports rules committee no later than the coaches' meeting on site does need to happen. All protests need to be submitted to the control center, and please clarify this process with the coaches at the coaches' meeting. Protests need to be filed at the control center no more than 15 minutes after the completion of the match. And then the Sports Rules Committee will consider and deliver a decision within a reasonable time, approximately another 15 minutes. On the Sports Rules Committee, it's imperative that you identify two coaches, either the tournament director or your designee. Certainly you'll be preoccupied with a number of things, so it's not necessarily the best use of your time. While protests are very important and need to have thorough consideration, you'll be handling and managing a number of other things, so perhaps designating someone else to hear these, if they do come about, might be in your best interest. And then, if at all possible, include one athlete, so that's a person with a disability, and one unified partner. Again, these individuals would hear the protest and then make a ruling on site. If anyone is directly related to the protest, either protest is brought forth by their school or they need to recuse themselves, and then similarly, if anyone brings forth a protest in which the members of the committee are competing against that team within their division, they should recuse themselves as well. If that does take place, please do have alternates available, and then as well, before appointing these individuals, please mention to them or ask them if they would be comfortable in serving in this capacity prior to announcing it to all of the coaches and making it public. Section 4. Critical incident response and inclement weather plan. Medical services, we will adopt the host institution's medical department coverage requirements. Please work with the host athletics director to confirm what those expectations are, as well as the supervisor of athletics. If you need to have medical personnel on staff and you do not have someone available, please let me know, and we will try to assist you with your effort with our points of contact as well. Critical incident preparation. Similarly, please do familiarize yourself with the procedure regarding emergency evacuation, so and so forth, so that you have a familiarity with that if in case that comes into play on site at the tournament. Inclement weather plan. For the most part, everyone has been able to designate an inclement weather date. Certainly with the weather that we experienced last year, we learned that we need to have that established, even as an example with the state tournament, having to reschedule twice. Have that date available, and I will work with you, but please do have in mind that the communication plan. So, for example, if there is a threat of weather on the day of your tournament, and it's a high chance of precipitation that will impede the proceeding with the tournament as scheduled, we may want to make the announcement that it will be postponed 24 hours in advance. With absolute certainty, the announcement to postpone should not be communicated any less than 5 hours before the tournament to allow for bus reschedules and such, and that's really cutting it close, as you know. So let's be sure to work together if there's a threat of weather. And to be honest, I do not typically closely watch the weather forecasts for each of the 7 district areas, so please take it upon yourself to watch that and work with your host athletic director to do the same. And then we will make sure that you have a distribution list or an account of all of the coaches ahead of time, well in advance, even before this scenario, so that you can communicate via email with plans and such. And then obviously, if postponement comes into play, you can communicate that as well. Section 5 is the last section, and then there are a number of supplements offered to assist. This is a checklist which hopefully after administering the indoor bocce district tournaments and then the outdoor bocce district tournaments last spring, we are able to put together an all-inclusive checklist, if you will, to make sure that every entity of the tournament will assist you in your readiness. So all of it is there. I will point out 2 components of this, in that advanced communication to the teams, again, imperative that the coaches are receiving communication as far out as a month prior to the tournament. So please make sure that that happens, and I've given some components that need to be addressed there. So start time, equipment plan, so should they bring their own balls, will they bring their own courts, remind them that they should come dressed, ready to compete, will they have access to locker rooms to change if necessary, competition schedule, so the brackets if at all possible, driving directions, again, where are they to report, will they report and enter through a side entrance to the gymnasium, or should they enter through the main entrance to the school, the exact location, and then the food service plan, and anything else, obviously, that you deem necessary to point out. And then similarly, of equal importance would be a plan with regard to your volunteers or officials. Officials, I've seen many plans work with many different districts, but having a plan in place and having the necessary personnel to fulfill this role is absolutely imperative. I've seen district tournaments hosted, and each of the teams competing will have a coach or a team representative, a non-student athlete, serve in the official's role. So those 2 individuals, similar to a basketball tournament where a representative from each team is keeping the book. I've seen that work quite well. Some of you have students such as the National Honor Society students acting as your officials during the regular season, parents, so on and so forth. So those people could be activated as well. Please, again, I cannot say it enough, identify who will serve in this capacity ahead of time, and then you will need to administer a training session on site. I'll get to more to come on the training session and the supplement that will help you with your efforts there as well. As mentioned previously, roster verification. This is a screenshot of what the roster, the postseason registration looks like. Having those, again, available on site, either electronically or printed out, is imperative. The coaches will have an opportunity to review the registration for each of the district tournaments ahead of time and give any changes. So we will have that available on site as well. So I'll work with you with these details, but wanted to make sure you have a reference of what the roster registration looks like. Likewise, as you work to physically prepare your venue, and learning from last year's event to make sure that the foot fault lines are clearly marked with court tape. So if you need court tape, do not have any available to you, please let me know. I'm happy to get some for you. But those do need to be marked, as well as the center court line, so that everyone is we are clearly and properly upholding the foot fault line rule. And then as well, it seems to be a best practice to run a continuous line with court tape along the entire length of where the courts will be, so that to better align the courts in the gymnasium. And certainly it's much easier to lay one long continuous line than it is to have several lines placed for each of the courts. Supplement A. As I was speaking about the officials training, again, please make sure, even if the individuals who are designated to act as the officials at the tournament claim that they are familiar with the rules or have been involved with the program for several years, regardless of the situation, please, you need to administer an officials review, maybe not training is the proper word, an officials rules review on site. And I highly recommend this document. The rules can be quite cumbersome, but this document is a Reader's Digest version, if you will, of all the rules that need to be maintained and upheld at the tournament. So, and believe me, it never fails. Someone who is persistent about knowing the rules and having been involved since, I don't know, since the inception of the program, so on and so forth. There are misnomers, there are rules changes year after year, so please make sure that everyone does go through the briefing session, and whoever is administering that session has this document well in advance and is in fact a rules expert and can answer any of those questions that might come up. And please do have a copy of this for each of the each person who will be acting as a rules official as well. It's good to have that on hand. Supplement B, excuse me. It's mentioned previously in the document that you must maintain a visual score. So scoreboards that are courtside need to be available so that each of the student athletes and coaches, spectators alike, know exactly what the score is as the game proceeds. A written score is strongly encouraged, but we realize with some of the personnel limitations, specifically during the school day, perhaps may not allow for you to maintain both a posted score and a written score. This, in essence, is a final written a document that will reflect the final posted score for each of the matches. Please do make sure that the players are listed there, the captain is designated, and that at the end of the match, a representative from each team does sign off verifying the result. We do recommend that the coach signs off to verify the score. However, some coaches would rather have the captain have that liberty if he or she is available. So please just work with your coaches, and again, that is something to mention in your coaches meeting the morning of the tournament. And again, this is the score sheet that then would be turned into your control center and then recorded on the posted bracket. And lastly, supplement C are all of the bracket options. It varies from a 2-team tournament, or 2-team division, if you will, to a 6-team division. As many of you know, it's very unlikely that we have a 6-team division, but it is available to you if that needs to occur. I will work closely with each of you through the registration process. It's a bit much to go through during this webinar session, but we'll work closely together to establish the divisions, and then as well the tournament brackets. As I mentioned previously, in each of the divisions, it could very well occur that the division ends after each of the matches and ends in a tie. I'll use the 3-team division. Each of the teams in this scenario could have 1 win and 1 loss. If that is the case, you need to choose which bracket type you will use. So in this case, what is posted here is you would use a tie-break criteria. So if each team finishes with a 1-1 record, then the tie-break scenario of the first criteria is least points allowed, and then if all the teams are tied or any ties still exist after that criteria, then we move to the most points scored criteria to determine the place of finish for the bracket. The other option with a 3-team bracket is having a playoff scenario with additional matches played. And again, it could be full matches if you have the space and time allocation, which many of you will not, to have 2 additional matches. They could be abbreviated matches if that is the case, but it would be an on-court tie-break scenario, and it is drawn out here. So after play, we would use the previously mentioned tie-break criteria of, I believe it was least points allowed and then most points scored to determine the seeds, and then they would play abbreviated matches to determine the final place of finish. So I know this is a lot to go over. If you do have any 3-team or even 4-team divisions, we can talk through the options. With 4-team, you can have a round-robin option, or what you see here is an advancement bracket, which is most common. However, a 4-team round-robin is an option as well. And just scrolling through the 5-team bracket with what is called a play-in game, and then lastly the 6-team option. Okay. Moving forward with a couple of other points, just to reiterate, I will send a follow-up email to everyone with some points of consideration. I will let you know, too, that we do have and would like for you as best possible to promote the Cool Schools Plunge. Many of you are familiar with that event, I should say. It is the plunge pinpointed or hosted specifically for school members. This is our 6th year in hosting this. It is scheduled to take place on Friday, January 30th. You should have a representative designated in each of your schools to help promote this and even sponsor a team and come to Sandy Point State Park to plunge. I bring this to your attention and ask that you promote this. I'll be providing some public service announcements to be read during the tournament. We're asking that you promote this because this event is largely underwrites the Unified Sports Program, Interscholastic Unified Sports Program. So since the inception, Special Olympics Maryland has been the primary funding for this program since 2009, and we have been able to do so with your help in advertising and promoting and participating in events, primarily the Cool Schools Plunge or Challenge, if you will. So I'll send some public service announcements that can be read during the tournament intermittently, very similar to what you would have at a school football game, school basketball game, so on and so forth. So seeing that we will have a fraction of the training teams advance to the state tournament, we want to make sure we capitalize on the audience at the district tournaments to make sure everyone is aware of this opportunity to fundraise for the Unified Sports Program. That is all I have at this point. You can expect a follow-up email if you have not received one already with these documents and any supporting information. Please, I highly encourage you to utilize me as your primary point of contact in making sure that we are ready and fully prepared. I will make one last note in that as we move forward and the Interscholastic Unified program as a whole progresses since the early days of 2009, we are working with the school systems to hand over, if you will, or have more responsibility maintained within the schools. With that, I say that to preface that we will make every effort to have at least one Special Olympics Maryland representative on hand, at least for a portion of each of the district tournaments, but at this time we are not able to commit our full services to be available from start to finish at each of the tournaments. So please do plan accordingly, and I encourage you to consider that as you appoint your staff personnel, either the additional person and in some cases the third person to assist you with the management of your tournament. In the follow-up email as well, I'll include my contact information, which I've been in touch with all of you, as well as your respective regional sports director, but please, again, consider me as your primary point of contact with regard to everything related to the district tournament. Again, I thank you for your time during this session and then as well leading up to and all of your efforts planning for the district tournaments and executing the hosting of that. Thank you so much, and let's please stay in touch over the next several weeks.